Good morning, everyone. As things have it, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. So Rob Pressman, who is our CEO, is unfortunately stuck in traffic. I should say the CEO of Institutional Financial Services, which is the group that Christina Cutlip and I represent. So we are going to go to Plan B. So I am going to read some remarks that Ron would have done, and we're going to engage in a wonderful conversation with these two wonderful women that are seating behind me. So first and foremost, thank you all so very much for your fine hospitality here at Texas A&M San Antonio. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Moriel Avina. I am a Senior Director in the Client Engagement and National Advocacy Group, and I work very, very closely with Dr. Matson on a number of things, but most particularly as she sits on our Hispanic Advisory Council. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you again. Let me go ahead and again welcome everyone. We are so grateful that Texas A&M San Antonio for hosting the Power of One event sponsored by our Diversity and Inclusion team and Unite, which is the Hispanic Latino Employee Resource Group of TIAA. What I wanted to underscore is if you are a TIAA employee, and we have all of our employees connected via WebEx, and you are not participating in an ERG, we want to definitely encourage you to check out the ERG available to you. Now remember, it's about being inclusive, so you don't need to identify with a certain group to be a member. It is my pleasure
to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Cynthia Teniente-Matson, who is the president, as you know, of Texas A&M San Antonio, one of the fastest growing universities in Texas. Dr. Matson also serves on the TIAA Hispanic Advisory Council, composed of our most trusted advisors as we look to deliver the best possible experience for our Hispanic customers. This includes developing products and services to address the financial needs of the growing Hispanic market, defining opportunities and responsibilities in serving the Hispanic community. Dr. Matson has over 20 years of experience in higher education with a track record of accomplishments that support campus growth, including faculty and student success, economic development, financial stewardship, and broad-based entrepreneurial leadership. It is my pleasure now to hand it over to our CEO and President of Institutional Financial Services, Ron Pressman. Ron, it's all you.
At any rate, thank you for filling in, Moriel. I've actually been listening in to your comments. Apologize for the fact that I was a little bit late, but you were doing such a wonderful job. I almost was encouraging them to just let you go ahead and finish up. At any rate, all I really wanted to do was to add my welcome and to thank very much Dr. Cynthia Teniente-Matson for joining us today. She, as you know, or about to know, will be in dialogue with TIAA's Christina Cutlip. Christine is the Senior Managing Director of Institutional Retirement. And in addition to Christina's many leadership roles since joining TIAA in 1997, she has served on the Department of Labor ERISA Advisory Council and was recognized as TIAA's Working Mother of the Year by Working Woman magazine. We're really proud of that and proud of Christina. She currently serves on the board of the Council of Independent Colleges and chairs the board of Almaty Collaborative Arts, a nonprofit organization that strives to create and facilitate artistic collaborations between African and American artists and the American artistic institutions. I actually am not sure how Christina finds time to do all this, but she manages to do it with a level of excellence that's just incredible. Dr. Teniente-Matson and Cynthia will be discussing topics of critical importance, such as how an organization can build a diverse and inclusive culture, and how we cultivate leaders from all sectors of our society. So with apologies for my tardiness, but great thanks to Moriel for filling in so well and seamlessly, I'd now like to welcome Dr. Cynthia Teniente-Matson and Christina Cutlet to the dialogue. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ron, for that welcome. And we all know how New York works sometimes with traffic, so we totally understand. But again, thank you so much for the introduction. And trying to think, is it good morning? It's probably good morning, everyone here in San Antonio. It's good afternoon to some of our colleagues out on the East Coast. And we really do welcome you today to this dialogue. I am delighted to be here from TIAA, a company that has worked with Texas A&M, the broader Texas A&M system for a very long time, and now with Texas A&M-San Antonio, and also with institutions across the country as we help people build their secure financial futures. We are in the retirement business, but we are also in just helping people with their broader financial situation as well. Some of you may know that TIAA is a provider of the retirement plan right here at the university. And for those of you who are eligible to participate, I'm looking at all of you in the audience, and I'm hoping you are participating with TIAA. I'll tell you a little bit about my background in a minute, but first I wanted to introduce our program today. I'm truly honored to share the stage with President Matson for a conversation celebrating the Hispanic Heritage Month. She is truly an extraordinary woman. I've known President Matson now for quite a number of years, and every time we meet, it's like old friends. We always have a lot to talk about. Today's session started as part of a series at TIAA for TIAA employees, but we are really excited to now have included the broader Texas A&M campus in that dialogue. And the conversation actually reflects some of the values of the work that the President's Commission on Equity, right here at Texas A&M, the students from the President's Leadership class, and those participating in the May Center for Experiential Learning and Community Engagement have also been engaged in as well. So I'm just really thrilled that you guys have joined us today. To begin our program, I'll take the role of anchor woman. I'm going to try to channel my inner Oprah up here and raise some questions for discussion. We really do want this to be a dialogue where we are going back and forth, and we'll open up for questions towards the end of the session. And we want to dig into issues and topics that are really important to our shared communities. And we are going to, of course, really be focusing on issues that are facing the Hispanic and Latino communities at this time. After we have had some time to talk and present some of our personal views, we'll open the floor to people here, but also to the broader TIAA community who are tuned in either in some of the conference rooms across the organization, but also a lot of people are going to be tuning in through WebEx as well. As a reminder to our teammates at TIAA, we encourage you to join in the conversation through Yammer. You can access Unite Yammer page through the email invite that you all received, and as well as through the enterprise intranet announcement online. And from there, you can follow along and provide comments. And if you have any questions, please send them in, and those questions will be filtered and will actually be asked as part of the dialogue today. So I'm going to turn to our actual program and why we are here today. I think it's always best to begin with what's personal for us, because it is that which is personal that really sets our views of the world and how we look at things. So I will start with just asking President Matson, I'll start with asking you a question. Please tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be a leader of one of the most respected institutions, and what are the values that have guided you on your journey and that inform you in the work that you do as a leader?
Well, first I want to welcome you to campus, Christina. Thank you for joining us, flying out, all of you for making this happen, and to all the audience in TIAA, thank you so much for including Texas A&M University System, and certainly our campus as part of this conversation across the country and the network within TIAA. We are very pleased with all the work you do for our universities across the country and certainly here in the A&M system. Let me start with some values. From my perspective, there's probably 3 values that are really important to me as a leader and have been for some time in my career and community. And the first and foremost is real respect for the sacrifices and commitments that my parents made for me and my sister to be able to have a better life. And the real commitment they had to education and imparting that to others. Although they did not have a formal education, they recognized the importance for the future of our family and the future of the world. And now that I've returned to San Antonio, I have a much deeper connection and commitment to what that meant to them and what it means to me now as a university president. I think you don't get anywhere in life without perseverance and hard work. And I think that's one of my most important values, is the ability to work hard, to think smartly, but certainly to work hard and to persevere and to be resilient. And it's something we build into our community, that we ask from our students and we ask from people around us. I would say the third is this drive, and in the Hispanic Latino culture, tienes ganas, to really have the internal motivation and drive to hold yourself accountable, hold yourself to high expectations, and hold the people around you to high expectations and a commitment to whatever it is you decide to do with your life or your career. And you know a lot about my career, so I will just be very brief in terms of coming into the university sector, having been 20-something years as a university employee in multiple systems. I started off and have always been part of staff and earned my degrees along the way. I terminated as Senior Vice President, Chief Business Officer, Chair of the NACUBO Board before becoming the University President in the transition. So I have a long background in history and understanding of administrative services, student affairs, and certainly finance, and continue to have a deep appreciation for what TIAA does for our communities. And since you're here, Christina, I think I have to ask you to share a little bit about your background with the audience as well as those that are on the web.
Well, thank you. My background is kind of similar to yours. Very strong parents who looked at education as sort of, you didn't have a choice, right? After you graduated from college, then you could talk about what else you wanted to do when you grew up. I'm seeing some nods in the audience from people that understand that as well. I was actually born and raised in Zimbabwe. And came here to the United States to go to college. So obviously education was one of the things that my parents really put as, as first and foremost. So I do understand a lot of the conversations that are going on right now, especially about the DACA students, and so, the dialogues that's going on about immigrants as well, because I am one of those as well. And how I ended up at TIAA was really, it's an interesting story in itself. I was working for a financial services organization who most of you probably could name off the top of your head. And I got a call from a headhunter who said, I really think you need to consider some positions that are open at TIAA. I barely knew who TIAA was at that point, 20 some years ago. But I said, okay, what is it that's so special about them? And he said, go talk to them and look around and come and tell me if you see yourself as part of this organization. So I did that. I went in, I interviewed with several different people, and as I walked around and as I got introduced to different people, I could see myself. TIAA was the most diverse organization, financial services organization that I'd ever seen and ever worked with. And I came back and then I looked at the values that the organization has, and it goes back to respect and the values and resilience. And I could see those things within the organization. And because the values really aligned with my values, that was why I decided to move over to TIAA, and that was 20 plus years ago, and here I am. So.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much. And by the way, it's a beautiful campus. We drove around, and it's really, really beautiful. So congratulations to you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some big picture issues that we are all facing right now. Hispanics account for more than half of the total U.S. population growth from 2000 to 2014, reaching 57 million in 2015. Given these demographics, how do you see society changing what shifts in the American culture and consumer needs might we see, and what should colleges and businesses do in response to these shifts?
You know, this is a really interesting question that we are asking ourselves all the time. One of the items that we need to be responsive to in the university culture and also in the American culture that you refer to is this rapid pace of accelerated change. There are disruptions in every sector of our economy. You think about energy, you think about natural resources, new technologies, robotics, artificial intelligence, communications. The world is changing in ways that we cannot even imagine. And we can't imagine in all cases how business will be done in the future. So it is very important in our networked, highly networked, 24/7 economy, society, that we are preparing for this vast amount of change. So as a university and as a university president, we have to think sharply about what does an educated workforce look like, and what skills do our students, our graduates, our faculty, and our staff need to be developing in order to prepare students for that future. When you think backwards from that question, really forces you to look at what's happening within the pipeline. So what do students look like for the future, and what does the future look like for those students? And what we see in our current pipeline is a growing population of traditionally underrepresented minorities. And we know that we also have a growing number of non-traditional students. So we need to reimagine our experiences here at our university to match what we're talking about that's happening in the society, and face those issues, confront those issues in how we design delivery models for instruction. We know that a majority, probably close to a third of our students, students from historically underrepresented minority communities are 3 times more likely to be living in poverty. So we also have to face those issues when children and their families are looking for universities, and what does that experience look like for them. In some regards, when you talk to families, they say thinking about college is like an international experience. And we know ourselves within the university, within the academy, the navigation that it takes to get through the system, to get in the front door, and to be successful in classes. So we really have to think through that immensely. We also know that because our students are coming to us as non-traditional students, they're also coming to us as working adults, they're coming to us as working parents, and many of our students, our families, they're working multiple jobs. So that really requires us to rethink how we develop and design curriculum and instruction to move the model forward. We are talking about all kinds of practices here. And as a startup university, one that is growing quickly and rapidly, we can embrace innovation. We can embrace new thinking around how higher education should be delivered. And we can do that to scale. We don't have to do it in pilot programs. And that doesn't mean that we can relieve ourselves from the responsibility of assessing what's working and what's not working, because there's a lot of work ahead of us. But in a very different context, in a very different society.
I mean, you bring up some really, great questions. This future student, what does the future student look like, and what does the future look like? That's a very interesting way to look at it. But you're right. I mean, the student of today is very different than the student of 10, 15, 20 years ago, and we have to be able to figure out how do you still educate them given the different dynamics.
I think one of the other important points to remember is that the value of the college degree is still very important. And there have been some questions in society about that, and we need to dismiss that thought with evidence. And the evidence is that close to 65% of jobs in our economy today, and even greater in the future, require a college degree. And in order to be prepared and nimble for the types of professions and industries that are yet to be developed, we need to be equipping students with good critical thinking skills, a strong liberal education where they are grounded in solid reading, solid writing, solid mathematics, solid ability to solve problems. And we know from the financial crash of the 2007-8 that those students, those individuals who had a college degree had a stronger welfare throughout the economy. They were able to hang on to jobs more than those individuals who did not, were not able to retain jobs. And there are segments of our society that are being left behind. But it tends not to be a college-educated citizen. So we need to think about that as we think about what we're doing in our future.
You had brought up resilience, early on as one of the things that you have personally, and it sounds like a college degree actually provides people with the resilience to be able to weather any type of changes in the society. But that brings us to another question that we really wanted to discuss today. How can an organization build a diverse and inclusive culture? You talked a little bit about how the demographics are changing. There are a lot of human resources programs these days that are aimed at achieving this goal. Those are very important, but how do we make sure that diversity and inclusion is a way of life that really informs everything that we do and not something that's just paid lip service?
Our university is a majority minority institution, so I actually think about this a lot in terms of what we're doing and how we're delivering instruction. And I appreciate being on the TIAA Hispanic Advisory Council, who I know also is talking about these issues as we think about inclusive excellence around the nation. What I have come to understand more and more is the need for our community to embrace what we know and what we don't know. And there is this wide spectrum of cultural competence and cultural fluency that sometimes we assume that because we have a strong, diverse population of individuals who come to our university, that we're automatically diverse. But in fact, we are not. We are not automatically diverse beyond race and ethnicity, of course. We have to learn about other cultures. We have to learn about how other people's as-lived experiences impact what they do as human beings here on our university campus. We have to be more vivid and more aware of building awareness of differences, building knowledge on how to deal with differences, and building capacity across our university communities. What was so important for me as I began to think about this particular set of ingredients in what does the university of the future look like, it became more clear to me that we needed to have more conversations about equity, not just diversity and inclusion, which are critically important, but equity. And so this last academic year and coming into this year, I formed a President's Commission on Equity here on the campus to begin to have the conversation for the cross-representation of faculty, staff, and students. And their charge is to look at equity issues, certainly within San Antonio, where our university sits within San Antonio, and create a vision and a view for equity-mindedness, and to ensure that those types of conversations and activities are built into our strategic plan, and that it's integrated in the fabric of all that we're doing. We have recently announced a President's Commission on Equity Fund, which is intended, we always talk about sort of put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
We knew that in order to incent some of the conversations that we're talking about, we needed to make funding available for programs, for students, for faculty, and for staff, and we've done that. We've made that award. But as we think about what does the whole campus community look like, I challenge everyone at TIAA, and certainly within our university community, to think about our voices, that we amplify our voices, that we act as visible role models, and that we lead with a respectful attitude. And all of these elements are what come together to build an inclusive culture in any community, but certainly very important for a university community.
And building on this theme, so how do we then cultivate leaders from all sectors of our society? You did mention that diversity and inclusion it used to be just about color. It's not about just color anymore. It really is about the culture, and you mentioned cultural competence and cultural fluency. So how do we cultivate leaders that get all of that and then can be really instrumental in changing the dynamics at our colleges and universities, as well as at our financial institutions as well?
Certainly. So this is where the hard work really comes in and really begins. I'd like to share with you that one of the most profound moments I had in my career, and have had in my career, was being asked if I would facilitate a panel. And that title of that panel was Race, is it an illusion or is it real? And I had that exact reaction. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't want to do that. I'm not prepared for that. I feel, ultimately, I did accept that assignment. But in order to do that, if this goes through this question of leadership, I felt like I myself personally had to really do an in-depth dive on understanding the academic principles, having a deeper understanding of academic scholars who study critical race theory, who study Latin crit theory, who bring the academic principles around what it is that we're talking about when we talk about race, ethnicity, class, and culture in a society. And having done that and read a lot about that, and I continue to read a lot about that, it began to form a foundation. But it also took me from scared and uncomfortable to feeling comfortable. And I think when we can have these conversations across the spectrum outside of our comfort zone is where the critical learning begins and moves us forward. So when you talk about building leaders, it doesn't just happen innately. This is not like building our financial technical skills or building our communication skills. This is a different way of thinking. And when you approach leadership with a growth mindset around a lot of historical activities that we can draw from, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, farm workers movement, now today the LGBTQ community movements, the transgender society movements, there's a whole range where we can learn from. But it does require thoughtful skill development. It requires us to be skilled in learning how to listen, to being empathetic, to putting ourselves in other people's shoes, and to really knowing what that means to try and understand as lived experiences as we think about our own leadership. And then as we grow around our own society and our own positions, we take this with us. And we hope that we can continue to enrich in the communities around us by being skilled and able to do that. But I don't think it happens without training and preparedness. I really don't. I've become more attuned to that in the last year than perhaps in other times of my life.
That's a really, and you are in a very unique position, right? You are in a university setting where you could help actually develop those types of leaders as part of the curriculum and everything else. So I think that's that's exactly right. So I am going to just talk about sort of the elephant in the room. One of the subjects that we've been dancing around, and I know it's probably on everyone's mind in this room when we are talking about diversity. Wanted to talk a little bit about how Hispanics have been portrayed and treated recently. And my question is, how do we promote civil discourse during what, for many, is a really troubled time for our nation?
A couple of nights ago, I had an opportunity with some people that are here in the room to watch a film. It's called Stolen Education. And without getting into the whole background of that particular film, I'll tell you what my takeaway was. The faculty member who led that, Dr. Enrique Alamán, used a phrase in the script and also in the credits that really resonated with me, and I think is critical for this discussion. And he called it the inheritance of courage. And I think the message there for me, as I've been thinking about it, is to reflect on what has really gone on in our society in the last couple of years, and certainly in the long time history that we have before us in the Latino community, Hispanic community, and to remember that now, today, we have the responsibility to use this courage of those who came before us. We have more educated Hispanics and Latinos now than we've ever had before. We cannot lose sight of that. We need more. We're not in a good spot, but we need more of what we have. We have role models in place. We need to use our voice. We need to use our voice to reject bigotry, to reject hatred, to reject hateful language, to help prompt up and stand up teachers that are in the K-12 system right now, as well as our own faculty, who are teaching young children who are hearing these messages being broadcast in all forms, not just on the television, but the radio, social media, and it has emboldened even more dialogue that we may not all agree with. But that doesn't mean that we should shut down our voices. It means we have to amplify our voices to help others understand two sides of the coin, and continue to build up on the cultural competence, the cultural assets, and the cultural awareness that exists within the Hispanic community. I think we need to rise up and be visible. I think we need to remind people in the Hispanic and Latino community and in all communities to practice local advocacy, to use their right to vote. Latinos are still the bloc that votes least in elections. We need to register people to vote, and we need to get out and vote. We need to practice community organization and work within local nonprofits such as ones that were mentioned that you belong to, and others that help spread this message and have the dialogue, have the courage to have the dialogue. And as hard as it is today, we have to lead with respect. And we have to be respectful to everyone within our community. That doesn't mean shouting down people that we don't agree with, but sometimes it does mean walking away. Sometimes it does mean we need a cooling off period to come back and have civil conversations. But there are paradigms that we can draw from, and we need to think about that as we come together within the Latino community and Hispanic community and continue to amplify the stories now more than ever.
So along the same lines, so confronting these issues, and sometimes it's really hard not to want to come back at somebody who has said something that is really insulting, right? And the cooling off period, I think it's really important to be able to just take a breath and think through what it is that you're going to say, and then be able to, to say it in a way that can hopefully convince somebody to see things a little bit different. So what do you think are the responsibilities of an academic community within, let's say, the borders of Texas A&M, but also beyond that, going into, into the community?
This is something that has weighed very heavily on me. I have to tell you, I reflected a lot about this. I saw a lot about what happened over this summer. It really has heightened my awareness, my sensitivity, my concern for where we are as a community, where we are as a nation. And how I felt that I could really deal with this was to go back to understanding what is the role of a public university in today's society, and what is the role of this sort of public discourse in today's society. Because some of the items, some of the issues that have come up, like the march in Virginia over the summer,
I live in Virginia, so I'm very sensitive to what happened.
And you lived through that, and it is not only disheartening. Some of those exhibitions and protests were reflections that our society, our country, our nation, men and women who served in uniform, came together to fight against. And now those positions are emboldened. So I thought a lot about it from our university's perspective. And it is important to remember that a public university must uphold our right to free speech. We must uphold our right to speak opinions that are different than our own, even when they are abhorrent, even when they are hateful. That this is how we learn and rise above it together. And this importance of voice is more important now. When I speak with faculty sometimes say to me, we feel like we need more education to understand how to deal with these issues in our classrooms, how to have a conversation that's not combative in the classroom. But it comes down to voice and amplification of voice and teaching students to behave in a civil and respectful way and to reject violence, to reject violent forms of expression. That is also now being emboldened. That if we agree or disagree, we just act it out with violence. Our country has already been through that. We don't want to go backwards. We want to go forwards. So our faculty, our staff, us, we need to be skilled in knowing how to have that kind of conversation. And this notion of respect is one that's difficult in this heated society. But if we lose sight of respect, we will never be able to engage in a civil discourse. And to be able to use words like I respectfully disagree, and I'm not going to have this conversation with you anymore because it's clear we're not going to get anywhere. But at least you're speaking your voice. And remember, generations before us didn't even have the ability to speak their voices. And this is something we cannot lose sight of. And that is ultimately the role of a public university, to foster and revere civic engagement, community engagement for all people, to continue to welcome individuals like yourself who come to our universities as international students and become productive contributors in our society. We cannot lose sight of that. As difficult as it is, we have to continue to rise above it.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned was listening, right? Because I think listening is a really key part of having a civic conversation. When you listen to somebody, at least you are trying to hear their point of view, and then you can convince them of your own point of view, but you have to listen to what it is that really concerns them. And then you can try to either convince them or maybe they'll convince you. But it really has to be almost equal, right?
In some cases, it's just empathetic. I understand that, and you're never going to change. That isn't going to change. That background isn't going to change. So it's almost like maybe you have to stop trying to change that and just move on.
Yeah, and just understand it.
Just understand it, and hopefully the other person understands you.
Exactly.
And keep moving forward.
So, we're talking about the voice. Do you think it is possible to talk about the voice of the Hispanic and Latino community? Is there value in a collective effort to raise the visibility of the community, or to attempt to create a monolithic view of the Hispanic community? I mean, do you attempt to create a monolithic view of the Hispanic community, or does that just feed to the stereotype?
Well, I think we have to start from a position of strength and start from a position of affirmation of what the Hispanic community, Latino community brings to our university, brings to our society, brings to our workplaces. So there is strength in embracing our assets from within the community and within our culture. There is also strength in hearing from all diverse voices. Not everyone in the Hispanic community, not everyone in the Latino community or the African American community or any community for that matter has the same experiences. We are not monolithic. We are very diverse within our diversity. We practice different forms of religion. We have different political beliefs. We have different abilities. We have different sexual orientations. We have all forms of diversity, which is what we embrace about all of our communities. But specifically for the Hispanic and Latino community, we know that we need to come together to continue to create pipelines for education. If you ask me, do we come together in one strength and in one voice, I think that's where we share a common denominator and a common factor. And that is getting more individuals through the pipeline. We still continue to lag in numbers. Although we have more educated Latinos than we have ever had, we lag in numbers. And we have a greater number of students, at least in Texas, and I think across the nation as well, that are people of color, that are people of Latino and Hispanic descent, that need to be exposed to mathematics, to science, to computer technologies. They need to be reading by age 8 at 3rd grade level, so that we have these opportunities to build and accumulate a society with educated Latinos across every spectrum, across every discipline, with bench strength and depth. And that is still something where we can come together, I believe, in one voice.
So what I'm hearing is not everyone should speak with one voice, but when it comes to education, it should be really, everyone should be supportive of getting a more educated Hispanic and Latino population.
Yes, and when I say educated, because I'm a president of a comprehensive university,
right,
we think of 4-year degrees. But there are great strengths in the Latino community in technical jobs, in paraprofessional jobs that do require education. There are very few jobs that you go straight from high school into a high-paying position or high-paying wealth. One of the concerns that I think we also can come together in is we need more of the Latino community in high-paying jobs. Many of the incoming students who want to be engineers, computer scientists, technical professionals are not Latino. We need those greater pipelines because those are the highest paying jobs in our economy right now. And without that pipeline, we cannot build wealth. And we do need to build financial wealth, right, to sustain the hierarchy of the passage of wealth and assets into the infrastructure of the Latino and Hispanic community. And that comes with smart financial planning, some things that TIAA does, good wealth management strategies, and the opportunity to achieve that increases with degree attainment. And so we need more degrees to be earned, and we need more Latinos and Latinas in the sciences, in the technology professions, in engineering to make a difference. Biomedics and all kinds of leadership platforms. We need more.
Okay, and I think you bring up a really good point, because financial strength also leads to really being able to influence many, many other things, including being able to educate more. If you've got the financial well-being, you can then educate more and more people. So I absolutely understand that.
But it creates a hierarchy of financial wealth that has been in majority society for a long time.
Exactly.
That has not existed in the historically underrepresented communities, that we can only attain through seeking higher paying jobs.
Absolutely.
Or starting our own businesses and creating our own wealth.
Right. Right. And it starts with the K through 12 and then kind of moves into
Absolutely.
college and university.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. As of 2015, there were 41 million native Spanish speakers in the United States, in addition to about 11.6 million bilingual speakers, if I've got my statistics right. What is your view on how language should be treated in U.S. educational institutions and in society at large? Should English be the primary language for courses at an institution with a majority student for whom Spanish is their primary language? Or, you know, what are the issues at stake here, and how should we be looking at this?
Well, I certainly believe that bilingual education is critically important. And I believe that we as parents, as a society, should be promoting bilingual education at a young age, like many other countries do, that we have not embraced. English is the primary language currently in the United States. It's really the primary language in many other parts of the world as well. So I think it would be difficult to begin to move away from that. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't embrace native language speakers, not just in Spanish, but in other languages as well. And we will find in school districts now that there are communities and populations that are embracing other languages and teaching curriculum in that regard, so that English becomes the second language and eventually becomes the dominant or the, equal language in terms of the bilingual, trilingual, monolingual influence that we need in our country. I think our society now has a much different view on bilingual education than we did before. We don't see Spanish speakers as a deficit as it was before. We see I see Spanish speakers as an asset. I see Spanish speaking, I see multilingual Chinese, Arabic, other sorts of language as assets to value in our university system, to value in our households, and certainly to value in the workplaces. It just makes us much more competitive as a business, much more competitive as a society, and much more competitive as a nation. So I think we're asking the wrong question. I think we ask, how do we educate all students in multiple languages? That's really where the United States is falling behind, not requiring everyone to speak more than one language.
Well, I was in Spain for vacation earlier this year, and in talking to people, people could switch from one language to another, and I felt I was at a deficit because I speak rudimentary Spanish, and I was able to survive because everyone else speaks English. But I came back. I was like, okay, I have got to learn other languages after that, and I'm making my children also be bilingual as well because of that.
I think one of the things in the Hispanic and Latino society, and those of us who grew up in some of these households, maybe in the 60s and 70s, understand, and maybe even into the 80s, have an understanding that our parents and grandparents felt that it was a disadvantage for children of a certain era to be fully bilingual and to really embrace the Spanish language because they saw it as a deficit, and that society treated it as a deficit at that time.
Right.
We aren't in that position now, but you have this gap within the Latino and Hispanic society of those of us who speak Spanish, those of us who don't speak Spanish, and we struggle with how we should feel about it. That's why I really think we're asking the wrong question and talking about the wrong issues when we don't focus on everyone should speak multiple languages, and we should embrace all of that and try to bridge that gap for our nation.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, okay, so one of the questions that I have is, so what advice would you give Hispanic Latino students in pursuing education and career goals? I know that's part of your role here, but to our TIAA audience, what would what advice would you give?
Well, first of all, don't give up. So as an institution, and certainly within TIAA as well, I think some of this holds true, that when you have a large population of first-generation students who don't have college in their family history, there are other support networks and mechanisms that are needed in place to understand how to navigate through the system and to understand that this is hard work. This is not an extension of high school. It's not even truly an extension. It's a scaffold onto the community college level. So the rigor is more difficult. The pace of learning is more difficult. The volume of information that comes at you anyway within society is more difficult. So we need to ensure that students don't give up. We need to ensure as institutions that we are providing the right support networks and that our employees, our staff, and our faculty understand the support network that's necessary. We do that here at Texas A&M, and so do many other wonderful universities, in terms of writing centers, tutoring centers, math support centers, course redesign to ensure that we know a lot about where the issues are. It's tackling those issues in how the coursework is designed and how students are supported. Students need peer mentoring. Students need to understand that they can cross the finish line, that they can attain their degree, and that everyone goes through this. Students need to understand they have to work hard. They have to stay motivated at every step of the way. We have to continue to impart the knowledge and the wisdom that is necessary to achieve academic rigor and academic excellence in degree attainment. I have superintendents in our local community tell me that some of their students that come to us, and any other university for that matter, who come from first-generation households, who come from households that may have financial diversity in their house, within their sphere of influence, are survivors. And we need to establish precedent and establish practices that help build on that survivor mentality in the affirmative. Some of the practices that we need to think about are not uncommon, but they're difficult to do. Things like block scheduling. We have to look back at how the course structure, the course schedule is defined. If we know students need to work or they have other household responsibilities, we need to structure a schedule that allows them to do that. And we also know that it's not, online education is not the answer. We support online education, it is important, and for some people it is the answer, but it's not the answer for everyone. So earlier, maybe a decade ago, we were all pointing to online education was going to change the paradigm. Everyone was going to graduate faster because we can all do it online. But for students who need that support network, online education is not always easy. And there are some learners who don't learn well in that environment. So we need to take all those constructs into account when we're developing course content and how courses are designed and how the schedule is designed in innovative ways to ensure success. And we do need to embed more experiential learning and community engagement and those types of things that we are looking at now here at A&M-San Antonio and doing. And like I mentioned earlier, not as pilots, but to scale.
Right. I know I had mentioned that we are going to give some time for questions and answers. First, I want to say, thank you so much, President Matson. We are going to switch to questions now. We'll start with questions here in San Antonio, and then we'll go to questions that will have come in through YAMA as well. So if anyone has a question here, we have our first question.
Hello, President Matson.
Hello.
Hello. As a student here at Texas A&M San Antonio and as a DACA recipient, many of my friends that are also DACA recipients and even undocumented students are very scared of our current immigration tensions, the rising tensions in this country. And it is within the Hispanic and Latino community, there's always support for us and stuff, but what are you, as not only as a university president, but as a community leader, going to do as far as actions to protect us and to provide us with a higher education?
I think you bring a very important issue, and I'm glad that you have the courage to be here and to ask the question. So first of all, one of the important things is not to go into the shadows, as I mentioned earlier, and to use our voices and to use our platforms. Here at our university, I'm very focused on making sure that we have the support services and the networks in place. We support organizations like the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. One of our representatives is here in the audience. HACU has lobbyists who are driving this issue, as do other professional associations within higher education, where we can get behind on our collective voices, come forward on the importance of these issues within our legislation to find solutions, to find answers. I have certainly spoken with our congressmen, Congress reps, our delegation, and I've been speaking with our local delegation here in Bexar County. But this is really a federal issue, and I have made my position known to our federal delegation that it is important that we provide opportunities for access and degree attainment and employment, and at some point a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
We have a question that came in through WebEx, and this is from Ruben Ara. And his question is, who was your most impactful mentor, and what is the most important thing you learned from them?
Well, you know, if you had asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have had a different answer than I'm going to give you right now. And I have to say that the most impactful mentors have been my parents. And while I've always seen my parents as influencers and ensuring that I had a good life and a good opportunity and being a respectful daughter and all those other things that happen in Latino culture, I have a much deeper appreciation for the sacrifices and the commitments that they've made so that I can be here today in a position of authority and influence. So that's really important to me. In terms of professional, I think professionally we all need to have mentors. I have received shoulder taps throughout my career, asking me to stretch myself, to take on new roles, to take on new responsibilities. And they were important experiences for me, and people who have helped open doors for education and for career opportunity and for upward trajectory. I value that, and I think we need to look for those sponsors in our lives. And for me, I would say they've been men, and they've been white men that have helped to open doors and open pathways. And we need to embrace mentorship and sponsorship and coaching, but mentorship and sponsorship in particular, which he's asking about, in all forms. And to understand that to know the inner circle and to know the inner culture of some of the dominant business circles and some of the dominant business practices, you need people who know it from the inside out. And that often is white men and individuals of power and influence.
You know, and if I were to answer that question for myself, it's almost a duplicate of what you just said. My parents were very, very influential in my life, and then I've had sponsors and mentors sort of that run the gamut. I haven't really limited it to one or the other. I've had men, I've had women, but some of the most influential have been white men that have really helped me along the way as well. So I think what we're saying is you need to be open-minded, and you need to look for people across the spectrum, and you also need to be diverse and inclusive in the way that you look at which are the mentors that can help you in your career as well.
I think the other thing I would add to your response is that for those of us that are in the room and online that are Hispanic or Latino or identify that way, and you have earned degrees, masters, doctorates, whatever the case may be, that we have to recognize that we're in a position of privilege now and a position of power and influence. And I don't know that we always see ourselves in that role. And so we need to recognize the privilege that we have and make sure that we reach back deeper and further and further back and pull up. And to remember we still have that role and responsibility.
We have one more question. Do we have a question in this room? Or we have one more question in this room. So.
Hello, Dr. Matson.
Hello.
My question is, for those of us in the room who are education majors, particularly a special education major,
Yes.
you talked about getting Latinos more involved in our STEM programs.
Yes.
What are some action steps that we as education majors can take starting now that we can implement into our classrooms?
I'm so glad that you asked me that question, and thank you for coming. I don't want to diminish in any way education, although I didn't call that out. We produce very high quality teachers. High quality teachers are going to be the key to our future, for the future generation of our population that's coming through K through 12. What I think is important for you, in particular, as a male individual in a school system, to remember that the encounters that students have with teachers, you can think about this as hallway mentoring, you can think about this as pathway mentoring. You won't know the impact and the influence that you have on students sometimes until decades later. So what you can do now and today is to remember the importance of your voice, and to remember the importance of every word and every action that you take with students, and to embrace them with the affirmative lens of the opportunities that they have before them, and to build on their strengths and their assets in your classroom. Whether it's in science, English, math, reading, writing, spelling, whatever it is, you're influencing them more than you will ever know. And that is one of the greatest gifts of being an educator and being a teacher. Don't give up, and take that back to you in the classrooms. And then teach them to express their voice. Teach them to understand information literacy at every level. And just because they hear something doesn't mean it's factually accurate, or just because they read it on the internet may or may not be true. Verify resources, double check citations, make sure that what you're teaching is actually factually based. And as they learn that, you're creating this circle of influencers and spheres that will pay dividends into the future.
And talking about teachers, my most influential teacher is Mr. Ramushu, who taught me English when I was in 7th grade. He forced me to know how to read and to write and to, I still remember conjugating verbs. So there is a huge role for teachers in the society and in educating the future as well.
I would say that just one more thing, as you get into the workforce and you become a teacher, to make sure you understand what the needs of our community are, and that you can bring that up with your principal, assistant principals, and up through the superintendent ranks. That there are lots of programs out there that some school districts never even engage in because there's so many other infrastructure challenges. And all of that generation of students misses out on an opportunity that they need to make themselves better for a better life.
I just want to say thank you so much, President Matson, for this dialogue and for sharing your experience. We got a few more questions, but we will get them answered, and we'll email the answers back to the folks that asked the questions. But again, we just want to say thank you for your partnership. Thank you for working with us at TIAA to make us better as part of your work with the Hispanic Advisory Council. Thank you for being a counselor to us as well as providers for wealth management and retirement for educators. And again, thank you for sharing your experience and sharing your beautiful campus with us today.
Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you to Ron for, if you're still online, Ron,
yes,
for inviting me and including me in this opportunity, and to all the employees with TIAA, thank you for listening in and for what you're doing for our employees and our community here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I know you didn't get to see all of the back room, but how many sites did you have on site, or how many employees?
Yeah.
So, yes, we had, this was broadcast throughout all of TIAA. We had 5 major conference rooms where we were actually streaming via YouTube, and that was in Denver, Louisville, New York, Charlotte, and Chicago, I believe. And then there were hundreds, if not thousands, of employees probably logging in all different locations via WebEx. So yeah, this got a lot of attention.
And the questions were, one is from Denver, one I'm not sure where it's from, but we also have people, we have 16,000 employees, just to let you guys know, and we have employees all over the United States, and everyone had the opportunity to log in to listen in. So this was, got a lot of attention across the organization, which is great because diversity and inclusion is something that is near and dear to TIAA's heart, and we are really trying hard to, be that organization that not only recognizes it and really works on it, but also takes what we have learned and take it out into the rest of, the country as well. So.
I'd also like to recognize Sandy Holt, who joined us today. She's a senior leader from the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And she was able to join us today, and certainly the work that you're doing in this space is the leadership role across our country. So thank you for spending some time with us here today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the partnerships that we all share in order to accomplish these goals.
Absolutely.
These audacious goals.
Thank you to our faculty, staff, and students for joining me today. I appreciate it. Please feel free to come up and introduce yourself to Christina and Morial and say hello. And they are also recruiting interns and new employees.
We
so
are.
we would love for our students to come, at least introduce yourself and learn a little bit about opportunities that might exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
David and others. David's an MBA student.
Fabulous. We have an office in San Antonio.
Randy? Oh, and I'd like to thank David Perryman and his team for helping us put this together, and the IT team for all of their technical work. Thank you, Randy.